My name is Samuel Girod. My wife Polly is in the back pew there, not against the wall, but right in the last row, in the last pew on the side over here. And we got kids scattered all over here. We are from Southeast Indiana. We're from Vevay, Indiana, Switzerland County, Indiana. We're 50 miles due west of Cincinnati. I grew up there. I moved in there with my family when I was 5 years old from Salem, Indiana, and I've been there ever since. And it's been be going on 39 years this February that I lived in that community. And I left the Amish in 2012, got saved. I left the Amish September 22nd, 2012, got saved September 24th, 2012. And then I was single when I left. I was the oldest of 13 children. I had half ownership of a construction company with my dad, and it's all I knew is Amish lifestyle, and it was wrong for me even to think about leaving the Amish. I had my own house, had my own barn, had everything an Amish man wanted, but I didn't have a wife, and so that's the reason I left, is because I wanted to get married. And in the community that I was with, we did not fellowship with any other community in the country, and so I'm going to talk a lot about this, of course, this presentation, but a lot of things that I'm going to refer to is going to be referred from where I come from and who I was in the Swiss Amish community. And it is day and night different than what Brother Aaron Byler, how he was brought up. His Amish, we were more righteous than they were, I'm going to say. No, I'm just kidding. But they come from the group of Amish that it's just completely a different page than what we were. And Aaron and Esther, they came up and visited us a couple months ago, and I had the honor to host them for a day, for a couple hours there, and they visited and got to know them a lot more. They're from the Lancaster-style Amish, and we're from the Swiss Amish. Basically, I'm originated from Bern, Indiana, Adams County, Indiana. That's where the Swiss settled into from Pennsylvania back in the 1800s, and so that's where my heritage comes from, and it's just like completely different, and we were talking about that. And so, but as Jonas was saying, as a whole, we're going to talk about the Amish as a whole, primarily what they believe in, why they believe in, and their culture and their values and all that stuff is going to be referred as a whole. But what I wanted to share real quick with you too is a lot of the books and stuff, the prayer books and the song books and the Bibles that the Amish use is up here. And one book that I'm missing is called The Martyr's Mirror. I don't have that book. I forgot to bring it. But if you want to look at this during break or during lunch, you're welcome to come up here and look at this. I got a little bit of information on these plaques here to read, to show you what we had and what we had growing up, etc. So what we're going to be doing here, we're going to be talking about the culture and the values of the Amish. In early childhood birth, Amish families have an average of 7 children per family. Although it's not all that uncommon for some families to have 13 plus children, all the way up to 18 children. I know of a family that had 20 children from the same father and mother. And the youngest son I just saw at my grandfather's funeral in mid-December last month. I was at my grandfather's funeral and I saw that son there. And I asked him how old he is. He said he's 53 years old. And so he was the youngest of 20. And so I remember when I was a kid when his mom and dad died. And so that's a big family there. But children are often born at home and in birthing centers for these following reasons here. Number one is cost. A lot of times they have births at home because of cost, and they have midwives, and they have their birth at home because they don't have insurance and they don't want to go to hospitals. However, some of them still do go to hospitals. Amish do not carry medical insurance, and most have 6 to 17 children. 7 to 16 children, hospitals can become quite expensive. Then the second thing is comfort. The home environment offers more comfort and flexibility. I know that when we had our first child, Rebecca, was born in the hospital, then we had the second and the third one were born in the hospital, and my wife said, I want to have the rest of them born at home. So we have home birth, and we have them in a tank of water. And I'm telling you what, that's scary for a husband to go through all that. But you know what? Every one of them survived by the grace of God. And so we had number 10 child in July, and he's 6 months old today. And so we had 10 children. We actually lost 3. 3 of them are in heaven due to an illness that they had, actually a genetics disorder that they had when they were born. And so we lost one at 10 months old, 3 years old, and 6 years old. And so they were very near and dear to our heart. And one thing that I know for sure is that I will see them in heaven one day. Amen. Without a shadow of a doubt. And I often try to imagine what it would be like to be lost and have have loved ones that are passed away and are gone. And especially children, the uncertainty of not knowing if you're going to see them in heaven. And then the third thing is Amish lean more towards midwives and doctors who are used to helping them and better understand Amish culture than nurses and doctors and in stressful and routine hospital settings. And then also another thing too is pregnancies where babies come from are in most cases only discussed between adults and husbands and wife. Like my wife, she left the Amish in 2012 as well, in May of 2012. She was in Missouri, and she was the third in line of 5 children, out of 5 children. And so when she left with owning 2 or 3 greenhouses with her brother, and left everything behind because they were just constantly hounding on her because of her shape of her cap, and just everything just went on. It was over a year-long thing, and she just got so tired of all that. But what I wanted to share is that my wife's mother was a midwife, and my wife didn't know nothing about birthing a child, and she was 27 years old when she left. When I married her, I had to educate her what I knew about having babies. And she didn't know. She literally did not know. And so that's how in most communities, the mothers will not talk to their daughters, especially their children, about it until they get married. And so they experience that a lot when they get married. And then also when young children turn 5 years old, they begin to be given work responsibilities such as carrying firewood, mowing grass, and helping with farm chores. Amish schooling. Schoolhouse is typically one large open classroom with a basement to a house and a fire furnace underneath. Where I come from, there was just a one-room schoolhouse, and we had from 20 to 30 children in there, sometimes up to 40 children. And then when it gets up to 30 and above, they usually split the schoolhouse and with a temporary wall. Then they have 2 teachers in there, and it's taught from 1st to 8th grade. They don't normally go past 8th grade, and they don't get no GED or nothing like that. They just go from 8th grade, and then they're out of school. In some cases, Amish send their children to public schools for various reasons. And so this is more common in communities like in Holmes County, Ohio, Northern Indiana. Some Amish homeschool their children. Not very many, but some homeschool their children depending on what the problem is at that time. But like I left the Amish, and when I went to GED classes after I left, they did a pre-test on me, and I had levels of 3rd and 5th grade education on some subjects. I didn't have no more than that. And so I only had an 8th grade education. So I used ChatGPT, and I told ChatGPT to answer me with an 8th grade education. And so that's how it does. It answers me with an 8th grade education so I can understand what it's trying to say. And then community involvement is oftentimes an Amish farmer in the community will allow the schoolhouse to be built on the property without charge. For example, my uncle had an acre or 2 that he had on the corner of his property, and he donated that to the church, and then we built a schoolhouse on it, and that's where we have been having schools now for over 20 years. It's close to 30 years that we've been having schools there at that school. Community pays for it usually and maintaining the cost for the schoolhouse. Usually each school has up to 3 school board members, and every 3 years they change a school board member, and they're the ones that dictate who's going to teach and who's not going to teach. Basically, if there's several of them in the community that want to teach, so we get a school board meeting, and then the whole community comes together, and then they vote, and then if there's 2 candidates for teacher, then the whole community votes that's in the schoolhouse, and then it goes from there. And sometimes when there's problems in the school that the teacher can't handle a child or a young kid or whatever, they get the school board there to help with that for disciplinary actions if the need arises and it's beyond what the teacher can be capable of handling. And so I've experienced that several times where a school board had to come in when there was a young lady teaching and she couldn't handle the 8th grade boys or whatever, and then the school board would have to come in and spank them. And it's not uncommon for a young girl to go to school until she's in 8th grade, and then she graduates, and that very following season, that following fall, she becomes the teacher. And so they teach. I had 8 sisters in my family, and I believe every one of them taught that very next fall as a teacher when they got out of school. Or if they don't teach, they go and are an assistant to a teacher. And so it's not uncommon for that. Without any education of being a teacher, they go and be teachers right away. So usually the students start school at the age of 6 and graduate in the equivalent of about 5th to 6th grade education, like I shared a little bit ago. The students are taught basic math, reading, writing, English. And then 2 reasons for 8th grade education. Number 1 is, oh, I gotta turn that. 2 reasons for 8th grade education. Number 1 is practicality. Amish believe that 8 years of classroom training provides a child with enough schooling to survive and make a decent living in an Amish career. So without them really realizing it, they control how much education they get for the simple fact that they don't want to educate them too much, because if they load too much, they're going to be involved with the English world too much. They're going to be involved with that too much, and they don't want to do that. So they just give them the basic subjects. For example, I have 12 siblings, and out of those 12, I believe that 4 or 5 of them are actually saved and they're in the Amish community. And my dad, I believe, is saved, and we had a bad relationship after I left, and we're now just working that out. He's understanding a lot of things. He told me for years that it's all works-based salvation. Last summer, he said it's not works-based salvation. It's by faith and through faith alone. And I said, Dad, that is so right. Anyhow, I visited my brother and sister in Litchfield, Kentucky, and they married into Old Order Horse and Buggy Mennonite. And so there was 3 families in Litchfield, Old Order Horse and Buggy Mennonite, they married into, and they got together, I think like 10 years ago, soon after I left. And my brother married into a family from the 35ers, Old Order Horse and Buggy Mennonite. Well, they claim to be born again. They claim to be saved, which I believe they are. But they still have this mentality that I am out here with the lust of the eyes and the pride of life and all these things in this world. They don't see it yet, that they still hold themselves at a position that Anabaptism is still superior than anything else that's out there in the world. They're so what word would you use? They're so brainwashed in a sense that they believe that their culture is still so important, and it's because of all the education that they got in the classrooms to just make enough of, they just got enough of an education that they need to leave everything else. Like they consider the cell phone of the world. They consider the cell phone like of the devil. It is the worst thing ever. What they don't realize is I agree with them, but I still use it. And I need it. It's a tool. It all depends how you use it. And some of them believe, well, we just have the landline. We just don't have the smartphone because it's easy. Well, you can take the landline, you can call some unforbidden, godly line too if you want to, and listen to some stuff that's not good there either. So they don't realize that. And so they really hold back. And I wish we would do that a little bit more, but that doesn't make them better than me. That doesn't make anybody else better than anybody else. That's right. And so the Amish recognize that they and the world as a whole need doctors, bankers, law enforcement, and other professionals in college and universities and college and universities produce. However, they do not see a need for such learning and career aspiration in their own culture. And then number 2 reason is religion. Amish feel higher education can lead a person away from their religious upbringing and community. Religion is not offered or taught in school. Religious teaching is typically left as a matter for the church and home. We very seldom read the Bible in school. There was maybe on a Friday we would have German, and we would read from the German speller book. They would have a German speller book right here, and this is what we would learn how to spell German and write German. And I remember in my 8th grade year, my grandmother was actually my teacher, and she made so that we read the Bible in German on Fridays. That was one subject, and it was the last class on Fridays that when we would do it. That's the only time I ever remember reading the Bible in school. Other than that, we would read and sing songs in German, but we were taught to speak English in school. We were raised at first to speak German, but didn't speak English in school. We had to speak English in school, and then we had to learn how to do German. But what people don't understand is the German that we learned in school was not actually the language that we spoke. I spoke a Swiss dialect. Jonas and Aaron and Esther, and my wife, they spoke Pennsylvania Dutch dialect, which it's a German words, but it's just different dialects. We did not speak the dialect that's in the Bible or in the German book. but that's what we had to read. And there were some members in the community where I came from that they said that German is the holy language. They literally told me that German is the holy language. And then now Amish teenagers, between the ages of 14 and 17, their young men are taught their father's trade, and young women are mentioned and taught how to garden, cook, clean, and do laundry, and make meals. And in that church, teenagers must wait to join the youth group until the age of 16 or 17. And at this age, young Amish are considered old enough to start dating. I remember that I could not wait to turn 17 years old because that allowed me eligible to date. But to get married, you had to be baptized. And then once you get baptized in the Amish church, you become a member, and you also become eligible to get married. And you were eligible to vote in the Amish community, on the Amish church as well. And so at the age of 17, youth usually get baptized and join the church. And this age varies from one settlement to another. And then on Sunday evenings, the youth meet at the same house on which church services were held during the day to sing German songs. And this service is called the sing-ins. That usually happen on Sunday nights. And dating and marriage are not put together by parents or the church. Partners have to marry within the same fellowship. Where I was at in 2009, we were by ourselves. It was about 10 to 15 families. I can't remember how many families it was. And we didn't fellowship with any other community in the country. We were all by ourselves. Like Jonas shared in the first session, one of the core things that the Amish believe and hung on to, basically what I say their gospel is shunning. That's their gospel. That's their thing, that you have to shun these people. If these people are offline, you have to shun them. And if that church over there communicates with fellowship with that church, then that church has to be shunned too, because they're not recognizing this church is shunning them. That's how I was raised. I was raised that shunning and excommunication is basically the gospel. And so by the time 2009 rolled around, we were all by ourselves. And there was no young ladies there for me to get married to that I had any interest in, and I was mostly related to all of mine. And then there was a group in Davis County, Indiana, 135 miles west of us, that also was in a community that was also kind of by themselves. And so I decided I'm going to go there and ask this one girl out and see if she would be interested in having a relationship, and she said she would. About a month later, a member from the church came to me and said he cannot allow me to marry that girl or to even date that girl, and I asked why. He said, because you took things in your own hands and you didn't let God do the work. I said, well, how do you let God do the work? He said, well, you just don't take it and you don't ask. I said, well, how do you let God do the work, though? He said, well, furthermore, also, they have indoor bathroom, they have plumbing, they have running water, they have cabinets hanging on the wall, and they have gas lights, and also, they have Bible study every morning. We don't do that. We didn't grow up like that, so we're not going to do that. So I don't think you should do that, because if you do that, then it's going to just make you advance further. You talk about devastation, confused, not knowing what the world to do and how to go about it to seek someone to be there. So that was me. We had to date somebody or marry into somebody that was in the same fellowship. And so that's what a lot of Amish groups do. Some groups call it bundling, meaning they are encouraged to date in bed with their clothes on. That's the Sorgentrooper group. I don't know if you ever heard of the Sorgentrooper group. Now, Jonas said that these Mennonites here are the most conservative of all the Mennonites probably here. And then you have the most liberal Mennonites, or most modern Mennonites there is, that you can't even tell that they have any Anabaptist background, right? Well, then you have the Amish also, the different sects of Amish, that you have the most modern Amish are just as well be English, because of basis against a conservative Mennonite. And so the Sorgentroopers are so conservative, and yet they believe in bundling. And a lot of those Sorgentroopers are leaving because of that. I know some individuals that left the Amish, young ladies that left the Amish because they were expected and forced to sleep together in bed with their clothes on. That's what they do on a Sunday night. We were not allowed to do that. We were not allowed to do that. It was completely forbidden for us to do that. But that was such a different sect of Amish that did that. And then also during church singings, boys asked to go out for a date. The boys that already have girlfriends pick up their girlfriends at home and bring her to the singing, and then take her home again for the singing until the singing's over. and spend time with her at the home. And then weddings. Before a person can marry, he or she has to be baptized member of the church. Weddings usually take place in the springtime or fall, or are traditionally held on a Thursday or Tuesday or Thursday. Weddings generally take place in the home of a bride's parents. That's not the case for all Amish communities, but that's the case where I was from. The bride is usually the one that the parents, if they had the facilities, the parents usually hosted the wedding dinner, the wedding reception. That's what I'm trying to say. And usually the ceremony was at another place in the morning. From 9 to 12 is how long the ceremony is, and at 12 o'clock we all leave from the ceremony and we go to the reception. And that's usually how most Amish are. Not all of them are like that. Amish weddings are handled very similarly to a Sunday morning service. The bishop and ministers head the service, and the couple takes their vow before the church. And I just said it starts at 9 o'clock and it goes sometimes till midnight at night. That's how long they party. Some of them party. Some of the communities I come from, they partied like crazy. We didn't do that necessarily, but they partied like crazy. Invited guests showers the new couple with gifts, which consist of hand tools, household items, and money. After the wedding's over, singing will take place for the teenagers. Couples are not allowed to have sex for the first 3 nights after the wedding. That's something that I didn't even know until after I left. And a lot of couples don't find that out until the day of their wedding. That's what I heard. So that would be pretty tough, I think, for some. But funeral services and burial, during that time that a deceased body is in the home until the time of the funeral, the Amish will not leave the body unattended. At least 3 men will stay up all night until the body is in the ground. They do so because of a story indicating that sometime in the past an Amish body disappeared during the night. Now, this is history that is in this curriculum that Joe put together. I never was aware of that, and it's probably true. I just know we call it the wake. And the communities that I came from, when someone passed away, the young folks would go, and they would have viewing for at least 2 nights. And then the third day was the funeral. And those 2 nights, sometimes there was 2 groups of young folks. They would go there the first night, and they would stay up all night and do what they call the wake. And then the next night, the next group would. And so that's how we did it. I was not familiar with this or why they did that, but there's probably some story about that. Have you ever heard of that, Jonas? You heard of that one, Joe wrote? I never did. And so funerals are held in Amish homes and sometimes in big pole sheds in the summertime. A large funeral can sometimes bring as many as 500 to 800 people, and therefore they don't all fit in the house. Now, my grandfather just passed away December the 13th. He was 83 years old, or 88 years old. 88 years old. He passed away he had dementia real bad. And we went to the funeral in Cynthiana, Kentucky, and the house was completely full with people, and then they had to overflow in the shed. And then so they had 2 preachers in there preaching it. So sometimes the overflow goes in 2, maybe sometimes 3 different buildings. That's how much it brings people together. The Amish women always wear black dresses at funerals. And if a relative passes away, they will continue to wear black dress for a length of time after the funeral, sometimes up to 6 months to a year, depending on the individual. I remember my mom and my sisters, they would wear a black dress for every Sunday church, and for every occasion they would wear a black dress in mourning of the individual that passed away. And depending on how close the relative was, it was maybe for a month, and sometimes if it wasn't a very close relative, in honor of that person, they would do it for a month. Sometimes it would be 6 months, sometimes a year. I remember Mom wearing it for a year if some family relative died. And so 3 days before the funeral takes place, relatives and friends will gather at the home of the deceased. During that time, people hardly talk, and when they do, it is whispering voice only. The deceased person is released on a non-Amish embalmer who takes the body into the town for prepping, and when the embalmment has been completed, the body is returned to the home where the funeral will take place. And then mentorship, father to son. Fathers work with their sons at a young age in order to teach them a work ethic. Father teaches son their work trade. By the time the son reaches the age of leaving home and getting married, they have, for the most part, learned how to run their own business and support a family. I was 14 years old when my father took me to work full-time. Right after the year I graduated, I went to work full-time. In the summers before that, when I was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I would go to work with Dad. And so I was taught how to do construction my whole life. And And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that ethic. I'm thankful for that teaching that Dad has taught me. But it's good to know that and to have all that. But now that I left the Amish, I thought about seeking another career, law enforcement or something in that aspect. But I was 30 years old when I left, and I realized, you know what, I'm not up for this education stuff. I'll just stick to what I know. And that's what I did. I stuck to what I know, and now I basically have four businesses. I build cabins on skids in my shop, and then I do general contracting. I have a dumpster business on the side, and me and my wife, we Airbnb as well. And so there's other ways you can do it, and we do all of that without any GED or anything more than an 8th grade education, and the Lord is still provided and blessed. And so that GED stuff is good for some things, but I think it's also just a bunch of silliness. That if you want to just have your own, but if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or law enforcement, yes, get your GED and do that. But I sure wasn't cut out to be. I hated school to start with when I went to school, and I wasn't going to go back to school if I didn't need to. So I used the gifts that God gave me. Anyhow, a few trades that are very common among the Amish include dairy farming, sawmills, blacksmith shops, woodworking shops, and carpentry. That's basically all that you're taught in the Amish. I mean, there's communities that are so big now. Up in northern Indiana, for example, a general contractor is not necessarily a general contractor anymore. There's now just specifically window companies. There's window installation companies. There's companies that just make doors for cabinets. There's companies that just make cabinet bases and frames, and they now are breaking everything down where it used to do everything. Now there's so much business and so many communities that have so many crews that they break down. There's just specifically roofers and specifically siding guys, which that was anyways going around, but they break it down more yet. It's just so much work up there, so they know all of that stuff. But it all goes back to woodworking and carpentry. And then for mothers and to daughters is that mothers will work with daughters and teach them the daily duties of the house. By the time the daughters reach the age getting married, they, for the most part, know how to do things and run a home on their own. Mothers teach their daughters how to bake, cook, and clean. And so that's what mentorship is. Amish involvement in the world. Voting is rare in the Amish, but yet it is happening in a lot of places. In Bath County, Kentucky, my grandfather, they moved out in 2007 down to Bath County, Kentucky because the land was cheap. They could buy land for twice as cheap as what we can get up in Indiana. They moved down there, and so when they moved down there, when the land was so cheap, the roads were a lot worse too. And so my uncles and my grandpa were completely against voting for politics or anything, voting because that is being part of the world. Well, they got down there and they realized that if they want to have good roads, they're going to have to vote. And so they voted. And so it's very rare. There in Indiana, where I'm from, where my dad and them, they still don't vote. We got pretty good roads there where they are. But only around 10 or 50% of the Amish people cast ballots on a presidential election. I heard that Pennsylvania Amish is what helped swing that state. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. That because the Amish voted for Trump back then. Is that true, Aaron? Do you know that? But anyhow, it might be true and it might not be true, but a lot of Amish in Pennsylvania here in Ohio vote actually on that level, presidential level. Reasons why the Amish generally don't vote is they view the world as a material kingdom and do not come to conform to it in any way. Do not want to conform to it in any way. Because Amish do not enter public office or take position in government positions as they have less. Amish, also, number two there, Amish rarely accept government handouts. However, I've heard of incidents where they do. In some communities that they are now accepting government handouts, such as food banks where they go and get food that's provided by the government. They do that. Amish do not go to war. Amish believe that by resisting violence and avoiding service in the war, they are following Christ's example. They believe that Jesus accepted the beating on the cross in Calvary without resisting, and emulate this same attitude towards worldwide conflicts. And then Amish pay taxes. A lot of people say that the Amish don't pay taxes. Well, my dad didn't pay income taxes for years, but he always paid property taxes. You have to pay your property taxes because if you don't, then they're going to take it away from you, the land. But we do pay taxes, and most of them do pay taxes, and they have to pay taxes. Now, a lot of them don't have Social Security numbers, and being that they don't have Social Security number, the Federal Reserve has cracked down that in order to have a checking account or a savings account, you have to have a Social Security number. And so in 2010 or 11, I went and got my Social Security number because they were going to shut my checking account down. So I went and got a Social Security number, and I was able to keep my checking account. Then they cracked down more. Okay, you can't borrow any money until you have a Social Security number. So now they get Social Security numbers for that. And there's a community in Branch County, Indiana, and Coldwater, Michigan. Branch County, Michigan, Coldwater, Michigan. There's a group there. They got a lot of family there. That there's a bunch of farms there that were owned by families for 40 to 60 years. And now Michigan has really cracked down that you got to have a Social Security number in order to get building. Then you got to get a building permit, and then we'll loan you the money to do this. Well, the Amish don't believe there. They don't believe they have Social Security numbers, so they refuse to get Social Security numbers. And so here's a 100-acre farm that had 10 children split into 10 different ways. I mean, you go up there, and where the driveway went into the farm here, now they got a road going back here with a driveway going off here to the backside of the corner here, with another driveway going over here to the backside of the corner here. Because the old man that has that farm is basically selling that land to them, and they're just selling it on cash or payoff or whatever, with any bank transaction. With any bank transaction, and probably with any title or land transaction. I'm not confident on that or positive on that, but in order to be recorded, you about have to have Social Security number and all that stuff, I'm assuming. I don't know. But that's the extent that they go to not do all those things, to be not part of that. Men's hobbies, auctions and horse sales, that's some of the main things that the Amish that the men go to. They love going to auctions and horse sales and go to buying horses. They're so into it. That's just, they love making money. So I tell you, somebody that can make money is Amish. They are one of the most prosperous people there is. They know how to make money. And so barn raisings, the Amish believe in strong sense of community and helping one another out. Barn raisings are one way they exhibit this belief. Now that's the one thing that I believe is missing in this culture, and that is helping one another out. And that is getting together in a community sense and helping one another out. I think that's missing. I really miss that. And so we try to do that as much as we can to continue that up there where we live. Barn raising requires much organization, create a need for supplies and labor. I remember that when we built our house in 2000, we had what we called a frolic. That's the same thing as what we call a frolic or a barn raising or house raising or whatever. I remember my dad, weeks ahead, would cut out all the rafters, would cut out all the studs, would get all the windows there, and he would prep everything, would have everything ready so that when we have 50 to 100 people come there, it would be ready to go. We'd be able to raise this thing up in one day. And so there's a lot of organization and required a lot of organization to get going on such things like that. And then hunting and trapping is something that the Amish love to do. They love to hunt and trap, and when we had church services in the barn, before the church service started, we would come and bring our horses and put our horse in the barn. We'd be talking out in the barn there, a bunch of us young men and married men. It was never the subject about God and His grace. It was always about how big of a buck you got, or how many animals you trapped, or how much I paid for that horse, or how much, did you hear about that guy that paid for that horse over there? He paid $20,000 for that horse. It was never, ever that I can remember the subject about God's grace and His love. Wow. It was always materialistic things, talking about work, talking about the job, and talking about trucks even. Talking about this guy's truck. Did you hear how his truck sounds and what kind of truck he's got? Argument about Belgians and Perchins and about Chevys and Fords and Dodges and all that stuff. It was never that I can remember about the grace of God. Never. We'd go into church service, sit for 2.5, 3 hours. They would preach a storm about hell and brimfire and that. If you don't live the Amish lifestyle, you are going to die. You got to do this and you got to do that and you got to have works and it's all about this and all about that. We'd leave, go to another place, and a lot of communities, they go and they're partying right after lunch. Right after church service, they're partying and drinking beer and doing that right after. That's the way it is in a lot of communities, not all of them. I was part of those communities at one time. Women's hobbies. Amish women pour hours into their quilting in order to show love to family and friends. They like noodle making. Amish women gather together to have noodle making days. It's very common social activity where they get together. When it was cleaning, it's not uncommon for a mother and her married daughters to get together and clean every month. They would have spring cleaning and fall cleaning, and then before the church, each household would have church services, take turns in doing church service maybe once, twice a year. And every time before that, that's when they get together and they would clean the house and clean the windows, clean the floors. Everything would be cleaned from top to bottom. Some myth about the Amish. The Amish Mafia is a real organization. That's a question that is asked a lot. Is that a real organization? No. Most of the stars in television shows that Amish Mafias are from Amish background, thus they know and understand the culture and how to act out their past lifestyle under the setting. They're instructed to do so. Amish don't pay taxes, myth number 2. Yes, they still pay taxes. Then myth number 3, Rumspringa the age, when parents encourage the children to go to the world and sow their wild oats and then when done come back and settle down. I got asked that question many, many times. Did you do that Rumspringa, Samuel? And a lot of people, when they say yes, Rumspringa, don't even know what that word means. They just think it's some wild thing it means. The translation of Rumspringa is simply, in English, running around. It's like back in my running around days. That's when we're in. So the television show really threw that out of proportion, that all the Amish are doing this and running. My parents and my church and my community would never allow me to do that or to even think about doing that, to leave the Amish and to do that. And there's just some more in that book there you can read about the myth. And let's see, where are we at here? There's some more. For lack of time, I'm going to go to session 3. Is there anybody that has any questions on that session?
I just have a few questions. Someone had told us that they did not vote because years and years ago, that was when Hitler had taken over. And at that time, they did vote and always regretted the vote for him.
Well, I never heard that.
So after that, they never did again.
I never heard that. Did you hear that, Jonas? That I cannot answer if that's true, yes or no. I did not remember ever hearing that.
Another question was, did someone speak to you regarding Christianity that changed you, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did, but primarily after I left. He did speak to me before I left, and it was MAP Ministry, Missions to Amish People, which I'll get in a little bit the story about that in my last session today. The last session today, I think, is about standing in the gap. And it's about us being part of the ministry, that what we stand in the gap between the Amish, former Amish, and us, and how we do that. And I'll share a little bit what MAP Ministry is, Missions to Amish People is, and how he ministered to me.
Okay, and then one more question, if you don't mind.
No, don't.
Like if you have a child and if you're carpentry, but they have an actual love for the sawmill or for dairy, are they allowed to switch direction of that? Or?
Within those 5 categories.
Okay.
But then not anything outside. Right. Yes, they're allowed to switch. Like if you don't want to be a carpenter, but you want to be a dairy farmer, yeah, you can be a dairy farmer. But you can't be a doctor. You can't go be in law enforcement. You can't go be a sheriff or, any other position that's not part of the Amish, especially where I come from. It's a good question.
I understand you said you pay property tax.
Yes.
But do you pay income tax and file income tax?
Yes. Yes.
If you have a social security number?
Yes.
If not, you don't.
Right. Now, there's times that several years there that my dad didn't even pay pay income tax, even though he had a social security number. But he started paying again because he didn't want to get in trouble. But there's a lot of Amish that don't pay it, don't even worry about it, even though they got a social security number. They get by.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question that probably everybody else does not want to ask. It's kind of a hard question to ask sitting in a church. But you said it out of your own mouth, so I feel like I can ask. So why is it when a couple gets married, they have to wait 3 days to have intercourse?
It's something to do with the Apocrypha, right? Is that how you pronounce that? Apocrypha, in the Apocrypha book of Apocrypha, where it talks about Toby. Something to do, I can't answer that 100%, but it's the scripture that they use. Can you answer that, Jonas?
The Catholics have a couple of non-canonical books, canonical, that they use, and the Amish adopt some of them to some degree. And there's a story in the book of Tobias, and I don't even remember the story, but again, I don't know where the tradition comes from, but the idea is that marriage should be not just about the sexual relationship, but it should be about love and those kind of things. So, yeah.
It's more or less a tradition.
It's a tradition that nobody really has a good answer for.
Are they there spying on the couple? How do they enforce it?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that.
They're
question.
just instructed on the day of their wedding.
I just know this, that one time my dad's brother had a lot of health issues. And I remember 25 years ago, we were sitting outside and Dad was telling me, he said, and they got married out of wedlock. My dad's brother got married out of wedlock. And so my uncle was having issues, health issues, and they felt like that was a punishment from God because of not doing what the tradition was.
Oh, and my other question was with the bundling, them being in bed with their clothes on. Can you elaborate more about that? That's awfully strange to force couples to be together in bed with their clothes on.
Yeah, it's very strange. I never knew that until after I left on that sect of Amish. So I just know that I don't know why they do it or what the reason is, if it's mean to get closer or what, but that's something that was expected even by, some of them were by parents. The parents expected their daughter and their son to do that. And do you have an answer? Hang on, get that mic over to her. Thank you, Thomas. Huh?
I could elaborate if she doesn't know.
Okay, I'll let you answer that because I don't come from that. I don't know what it is. Go ahead.
Okay, see if we agree on it. What we heard about that was families were poor, and so the houses were unheated.
Oh,
So they would have their dates in the bed. That's what I heard.
I never heard that. That could very well be. There's probably reasons for all of that silly stuff.
So I don't have a question, but I was told that the bundling was because the relationship is not built on the sex, it's built on knowing each other and that type of thing.
Possibly.
That's what I was told about it.
I think it's just a bunch of lust is all what I think. Yes, right there.
Thank you. Getting back to the taxes, I worked in lending for many years.
Okay.
And what I have observed, because I've had to look at quite a few Amish taxes,
Okay.
is that like for state income taxes, there are so many dependents with so many children.
Right.
That they rarely ever any of them paid state, but they would do a small amount of federal.
Okay.
I think the clarification is they did not pay Social Security
correct.
taxes.
That's correct.
And had to, but in exchange, they signed a waiver.
Correct.
Stating they would not receive services or benefits. And I think that's where the confusion is
Right.
on the tax issues.
Yeah, my dad had what they call a tax exempt number, but it was the same number as a Social Security number. Okay, come give the mic to Aaron here. He's got something to say real quick. Then we're going to get in the next slides here.
So this issue of bundling is actually one of those traditions, and it shows the strength of the Amish beliefs and their traditions. It actually started in Pennsylvania, where the German immigrants came over. See, it wasn't only Amish immigrants. It was immigrants as a whole, and they all depended on each other, not just the Amish. And it was actually the German dating practice, and the Amish adopted it because of their association with their neighbors. And this is where the tradition thing comes in. Many Amish did outlaw it, but some of the Amish, as they went on, they got to the point where they started calling it tradition, and because it was tradition, anyone that questioned it was a nobody.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron.